Insider Football with Lloyd Vance is back for another week. So excited to be with everybody here. We're going to talk about week 9 around the National Football League, and we're extremely excited to have our guest this week, OJ Spivey, coming to us from WURD and the Philadelphia Tribune, and he can plug his other areas that he's working with. And we're going to go heavy this week, and we're going to go heavy in the Philadelphia Eagles versus the Dallas Cowboys. And I know everybody is that was a game everybody was talking about and looking at. Everybody started talking about the KC and Miami game over in Germany. That was supposed to be the marquee matchup, and but I got to tell you, it was right here in Philadelphia where I am based out of, and so is OJ Spivey. We'll bring him in. So excited to have OJ on. I've done a lot of work with him in the past on WURD here in Philadelphia area. OJ, I think you're with Philadelphia Tribune now, correct?
Yes, sir. Sports writer at the Philadelphia Tribune.
All right, and he's a member of the Pro Football Writers Association as myself, and he's working his way around the Philadelphia scene in terms of sports in the National Football League, and we're so glad to have him here. Did you attend the game, OJ? I wasn't sure if you went to the game or not yesterday.
Oh yeah, I was right there in the press box with all the
Okay.
other writers and things, and we witnessed quite a game last night.
All right, so we got first-hand knowledge here, and we're going to break this game down. And like I was saying before you popped on, we're going to go heavy on the Philadelphia Eagles Dallas game. This was a game. It was. I watched all the games yesterday, and this was the marquee one to me. I kind of locked in on this game, and the interesting thing is, earlier in the week, OJ, I heard some people in Philadelphia radio saying, "Oh, this rivalry is nothing anymore. Dallas hasn't won in so many years. It doesn't really matter." But when I went back and looked at the stats, this is the 125th meeting of the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. Dallas still holds a 70-55 lead after yesterday, and they had won 4 of the last 5 going into this game. So as somebody that grew up watching these games and all the Buddy Ryan and the Jimmy Johnson era and the battles between these units, what did you think in terms of the overall product of this game, and were you as excited to watch it and the finish as I was?
Yeah, Lloyd, it was just great. I and all. I thought it would be like 4 or 5 point game, and it ended up after the 27-23 game. And then we look back at history and said, it's a long rivalry, and we had those years where it wasn't as good, couldn't find a quarterback, and you go back to like the Andy Reid era where the Eagles good for about a 10-year period, and the Cowboys were still trying to find themselves. As seen over the past couple of years, Dak Prescott and now Jalen Hurts. Before that, Carson Wentz. The rivalry is kind of back, and I love to see it. And you see two good teams essentially battling for the NFC East. That's what we saw last night, and it was a big game for both teams because as the Eagles prevailed, they now have a 2.5 game lead, which is essentially a 3 lead. Count the tiebreaker, and it was big for Dallas as well, the Eagles, because that was the um, that was the center of my latest article in the Tribune. Is okay, can the Eagles kind of extinguish Dallas and put some distance to the Eagles? I don't think it was a particularly clean game, Lloyd, because we saw the penalties, but it just happened to be that Dallas had more penalties than the Eagles did.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, OJ, when you start breaking down the stats of this game, the Eagles are now their number 1 seed, 8-1. They've kind of taken the driver's seat of not only the NFC East, which you said that 1.5 game lead that they're having now over the Cowboys in the game in hand, and then they have to kind of, in terms of NFC, they have the lead there as well. So I was looking at the playoff picture, and they're firmly ahead there too. So There is a team now at 6-2, the Detroit Lions. I know everybody thinks, oh, the Lions are the Lions, but the Lions are there in that second seed at 6-2. So you're going to have to keep an eye on them. Now, the interesting thing is when I look at this game, the Eagles, big quality win for them, 28-23. And when you start looking at they had Dallas dominated a lot of the stats in this game. Dallas had 27 first downs, the Eagles 20. But I think the biggest thing was that the Eagles were 3 for 3 in the red zone. And Jalen Hurts is really he's moving the chains when he needs to with the brotherly shove, and we can talk about that in a second. And they're also we lost OJ for a second. I'm sure he's going to come back. Also, the Eagles are doing a good job in terms of punching it in and keeping Jalen Hurts, who let's face it, Jalen, he's very beat up at this point in the season. He has that knee injury. He had the knee brace on. He came out for a play or two, and a lot of fans were holding their breath at that time. And they were wondering if he was going to be able to continue in this one. And he did a great job in terms of just staying cool, calm, collective in this one. 17-23, 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He was sacked 3 times in this game, but he was able to overcome that. And then you had Swift and Ryan, who's not on this week. We always talk about, you have to run the football to control everything. The Eagles, Swift had 18 rushes for 43 yards, and the Eagles did have the time of possession 30 minutes to 29 for Dallas. So that's 30 and some change in this one. So it was a good win, a solid win for the Eagles. The big thing that really stuck out to me was I think at certain points in this game, the officials got involved a little too much. Each team had 10 penalties in this game, and you don't want to see so many penalties. The Eagles, the interesting thing was they had 3 fumbles, and they didn't lose any of those. So, they did a good job in terms of the turnover battle, keeping the change moving. And then Dallas had their opportunities, particularly at the end of this game. So, something very interesting to keep an eye on. The Eagles are going to have to play the Cowboys. They have their bye, and they have a tough stretch coming up here. So we'll look at these games. They have their bye this week in week 10, and then they're at Kansas City, who's also on a bye. And then they have Buffalo, who's kind of reeling, who's 5-4. And then they play the Niners, who are coming off their bye, and the Niners really are looking for their opportunity to get back in this thing. And then they're back at Dallas again, at Seattle, and then coming down the stretch. The Eagles have a nice stretch coming down that they may need to maintain that number 1 overall seed. I talked about the Detroit Lions. They're at 6-2. They finish, so they're at Dallas, they're at Seattle, and then they finish with the Giants in Philadelphia. They have Arizona, who has a worse record right now. If the draft was today, they'd have the number 1 overall pick. They're 1-8, so they'd have the Arizona in week 17, and then at the Giants in week 18. So, a good time to be an Eagles fan. Exciting time around the National Football League. Hopefully, Angel, we can get. Hopefully, we can get OJ back on here, and maybe you could ping him and see if he can come back on. But exciting time around the National Football League, and the Eagles are right at the forefront of this. And I know their fans, particularly. I talked to my relatives who are Eagle fans, particularly my father, who's a season ticket holder. They're extremely excited about this team and where it can lead the rest of the way. Now the interesting thing is the Eagles do have some health concerns. They have Nakobe Dean, who had to come out in this game. I'm not sure the exact injury he had. And then you had Dallas Goedert, their Pro Bowl tight end. he broke his forearm, and they're talking about possibly that he's going to get surgery and try to come back as quickly as possible, maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks. We'll have to see on that, but that's a big concern for this Philadelphia Eagles team. Uh, Another thing that when watching this game, you had to notice, Dak had his chances, and he came up inches short, we'll say, in a couple key situations around the goal line. That was huge. Um, Angel, you there? All right. Well, we'll keep going, and then hopefully we'll get our technical difficulties straightened out here. There we go. Were you
There you
hearing?
go. Can you hear me? Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't hear you at all. Your screen went blank.
Ain't All right, we had OJ for a second there. We'll have to work out his technical difficulties. And in terms of this game, like I was saying, Dak Prescott, I think one of the biggest plays was that 2 point conversion. Obviously, if they had gotten that at the end, they would have been able to kind of yeah, it would have been a different scenario coming down the stretch, and they would have had a better opportunity to kind of close that game out and have different opportunities. But he did step out. Kudos to Brandon Graham in that one. Brandon did a great job in terms of he had back-to-back sacks and key moment of the fourth quarter, and then that 2 point conversion that I'm talking about. Dak Prescott was diving for the end zone, and everybody thought he got it, but Graham kind of forced him to step out, and they did not get to 2 points, and then that was a big key point of the game. So, you gotta tip your cap to Brandon Graham and the rest of that defensive line. They did a great job in this one. Um, there are a few things though for the Philadelphia Eagles. They're 8-1, and everybody says yes, they're the cream of the crop, and they're going back to the Super Bowl. We'll see about that, and they have some key games, as I said, coming down the stretch. But you got to see if they can fix their defensive secondary. I know they had some piecemeal guys in there. They had Kevin Byard out there who's just learning with the unit for the first time, and you had Blankenship who's just coming back from injury. He was out there and he was battling. He did have that big stop against the tight end right before he scored that touchdown. It was overturned. Um, and he stopped him short, which was nice. But the Eagles, it had coverage lapses once again. You had CeeDee Lamb, who had 11 catches on 16 targets for 191 yards in this game. He was a dominant player. And then Ferguson, the tight end, did a nice job for the Dallas Cowboys. Uh, Ferguson had 7 catches on 10 targets and for 91 yards and 1 touchdown in this one. So, over the middle and their defensive lapses have kind of been kind of tough. But OJ, I think we got you back. What do you think in terms of the Eagles and this win and needs to be fixed on defense?
Yeah, I think they have first they have a lot of problems in the slot position. You saw CD Lamb and other receivers throughout the year, get a lot of yards. They did make the adjustment late in the game with Darius Slay, and you saw Lamb's opportunities decrease. So that's the number one thing, and part of that is injuries too. First of all, losing Avante Maddox. He picked up rules So I believe once they get will be back, and I believe that he may return when the bye comes. Once they have their bye, so that may shore it up as well. And they've been trying, piecemeal it. Guys like Eli Rooks, who's still a young player, they're a little susceptible down the middle as well. As far as tight ends getting football, we saw a little bit with Ferguson. We saw that Miami tried to do that as well a couple weeks ago. But once they shore things up, and I know a lot of fans don't necessarily like the way they play defense, especially with the corners of Slay and Bradbury. Uh, you know, this next coverage they really like, to be more physical, but that's not really how they play. But I think that Barry and Slay will be fine overall. They just have to shore up those other things in the slot and down the middle, being to tight end a lot of plays down the seams.
Yeah, and I agree. I was talking about that when you were off about how this Eagles team, yeah, they've done a great job in terms of they get the W's. It's not about style points and everything, but as they move closer to the playoffs and this schedule is getting tougher, they have their bye and then they're at Kansas City within the Super Bowl rematch. That's Mahomes going to be throwing the football down the field. Kelsey's his number one guy over the middle. They're going to have to stop him. Then they have Josh Allen in Buffalo, and they have San Francisco in an NFC Championship game rematch from last year. Then they're back at Dallas, and then they're at Seattle. Seattle kind of struggled yesterday, and we can kind of go over that in a minute. And then the end of their schedule shapes up nice. So they have the Giants, Arizona, and then at the Giants. So if they need to close out home field, I think they'll be able to do that in those last three games. But OJ, what do you think was the mood in the locker room? You were able to attend the press conferences and everything. What were you seeing with the Eagles team? All right, OJ's frozen again. I guess he's having technical difficulties, but we will keep pressing on, and then we'll get the mood of what the Eagles locker room was at when he was there, and that's great. That he was on the scene and everything. I remember so many times covering all the many Eagles games I was at, particularly the Andy Reid era with Donovan McNabb and those guys, and there's nothing like being in the press box for a big game and you get to feel the crowd and everything. And I know this Eagles crowd was whooped into a frenzy because down the end it was getting a little shaky. I'll put it that way. You had a couple big penalties. Dallas got the ball around their 10-yard line. They're going 90 yards in a matter of seconds because of penalties. And I thought that Hassan Reddick penalty was not in a right spot where he pushes um, he pushed Dak after he had way after he had thrown the ball, and that was a big 15-yard penalty. And then they had the pass interference penalty on when Cooks was trying to catch the ball and move down quick. I think that's that sack by Sweat kind of turned that game, and then Dak was kind of frazzled at the end. He threw the ball to Tolbert in the end zone, and then he also the last throw was shorter of the goal line as well to CD Lamb, and we got OJ back. So OJ, what did the locker room seem like? Did you see that was everybody excited? I know a couple of years ago it was interesting. Sirianni he had the beat Dallas shirt on, and he was trying to buy onto the rivalry. Did he keep it a little lighter this time?
Oh yeah, ever since that loss that I believe Dallas blew them out, the first year and everything, he's kind of toned it down. All the trips have been Eagle Center, and no reference to playing Dallas. I mean, he does say it with his words. He said, "Okay, yeah, we want our fans to be involved, want them to be loud, to beat Dallas," but no shirts, no gestures, or anything like that. And I think the locker room was pretty jovial, considering that it came down to the last play, like you said. But they're just happy to be 8-1. First of all, they know they have a lot of things to clean up. That they have a lot of things to shore up. But they were pretty jovial in the locker room. Just happy to get the win, of course, by being Dallas. And I believe that they feel that they do have some cushion in the division, and they just want to, get some much needed time off because they
Right.
do have a lot of guys who are banged up. That starts with Jalen Hurts at first, but you saw some of the injuries last night, including the loss of Goddard. You even saw Slay and Bradbury get banged up a little bit, so they're happy for the win, and they're happy for some much needed time off because it couldn't come at a better point.
Yeah, and week 10 is a good spot for them. You see some other teams like Dallas. It was week 7, and then that's a long stretch from week 7 to week 18. They're not going to need time off, and if they have these nagging injuries, it's tough to get rid of and get the guys going every week. You start seeing the coaches kind of give these guys days off and things of that nature when they get older and they're a little beat up now. Big thing on the injury front. Is Goddard going to have surgery? I'm hearing on that forearm. And did they have anything in terms of when he's coming back?
Yeah, so it's looking like about a 4-week injury for Dallas Goddard. I'm not sure exactly. He may have been scheduled for surgery today, but I don't have any news on that. So it may be sometime this week where he'll go on with the 4 weeks. So, of course, they're off next week, but he'll miss about 3 or 4 games and everything. And my concern with that is that they don't really have a formidable backup to replace him. And that's not so much with blocking because guys like Jack Stoll, Calcaterra, those guys, they're good on the blocking front. They may be good in the running game. And, Stoll can catch the ball a little bit, but, nobody can kind of get downfield or break tackles or be as tough catching the football from the tight end position as Goddard. So Howie Rosen may get on the phone, see what he can find. It might be slim pickings this point of the
Yeah,
season, of course, after the trade deadline. But I think Goddard is going to be a pretty significant loss for them.
yeah, and an interesting guy. I'll throw a name as it is Albert O. He's there. They got
Oh,
him from the
yes. Yeah.
Broncos. Are they planning? I know he hit the field yesterday. Are the Eagles planning maybe suiting him up a little more, maybe using him? I always liked his ability early in his career.
Well, Nick Sirianni said in his press conference today that he does like the guys in the room. He did leave it open to bring other guys, but he did mention Albert O's name, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So they do seem to really like him because if Nick mentioned him by name in his press conference, so he may have something in mind. With the coaches, along with Brian Johnson and everything, and try to scheme. I don't know if they're going to move him up on the depth chart if not or not. But by him just bringing his name up, he could be somebody to watch if they can't get anyone else off the street.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Eagles keep pressing forward. But as we said, they're the number 1 seed in the NFC and the top team. I always see you got to win their division first, and they have a 1.5 game lead in division. So all signs are pointed. They're going to December 10th is a rematch at the Jerry Dome down in Dallas. That's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out in terms of playoff positioning. Anything else on the Eagles game before we? I know all my family members that watch show. They only want to talk about the Eagles. But anything else you want to go over on this game before we hit a couple other spots?
Sure. I just, I just can't speak enough about the maturation of Jalen Hurts
Yes.
as a quarterback and as a passer. And, as good as we think he is, or, when we kind of feel that he reaches a ceiling or some point, he just always overcomes that. He always goes over the ceiling, and it's we're talking about the sky now because you look at some of the throws that he makes, and I know that he can make great throws, but we saw the downfield throw to Devontae Smith for the
Yeah.
touchdown, which they've been doing quite frequently, by the way. But you just see it over and over again. You just remain in awe, and just also Jalen just using all parts of the field. And I know his critics. It was something that they couldn't foresee. And then, when I interview in the locker room, when I interview his teammates, whether it be offensively or defensively, the young guys or the veterans and everything, they still can't speak enough about Jalen Hurts. It's no question that it's his team, and they never felt like they were even when they were behind early, they never felt like that they were out of the game as long as Jalen Hurts is behind center. And I know he's ailing a bit. The bye will do him well also. So we'll see what happens during the rest of the season as he tries to uh, try to manage this so-called knee bruise that he has.
Yeah. And it was great to see him come back after that. And as you said, he rallies the troops, and then they're firmly behind him. Now, the last game I covered this preseason was against the Browns, where you saw Marcus Mariota and what he brings to the table. So, I know a lot of Eagles fans and the media do not want to see Marcus Mariota, and hopefully Jalen Hurts will stay healthy. And he's 8-1 for the second season in a row. Only Peyton Manning has done that in back-to-back seasons. So he's done a
Right.
great job, and he's gritty. He's a leader, says all the right things. He spreads the praise around, and such a quality young man.
Absolutely. Much more mature beyond his years.
Yeah. Now you can't talk about the quarterback position in this weekend without talking about this young man, though. Another quarterback that's growing and everything. I don't know if you were able to watch a lot of the games in the press box. I know it is sometimes, but the Houston Texans, this was incredible comeback victory, 39-37 over the Bucks. And CJ Stroud was incredible in this one, 30 of 42, 470 yards, which is a rookie record, 5 TDs and 0 interceptions. And it was a performance of a lifetime. And you're starting to see, okay, CJ Stroud may be taking that step to joining a Jalen Hurts and the rest of these guys at the top of the quarterback class in the National Football League.
Yeah, I was very impressed. I've been impressed all season with C.J. Stroud. He put up historic numbers yesterday as a rookie, as a quarterback overall. I mean, anytime you step on a football field and you throw for over 400 yards, no matter how long you've been in the league, that's pretty special. And also for him to come back and steal that win for his Houston Texans rather, that was very impressive. And I think he's right for the position. And we saw a lot of his maturity back at Ohio State. And I know there were probably some questions about, who Houston was going to take and who Carolina was going to take as far as Bryce Young. And I know it's a whole totally different situation in Charlotte, but Houston seems to be the perfect place for CJ Stroud because I think he has the right environment. It appears that he has the right coaching, especially with D'Amico Ryan, who I'm sure you know well. Also,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but I just think he's getting the right coaching. And when you're a young quarterback in this league, the right coaching is so important. Whether it be your quarterback coach, your offensive coordinator, everyone around you, and you have to have a good quarterback room, and that's kind of similar to what we saw with Jalen Hurts, even when Doug Peterson was his coach, and I see a lot of similarities there, and it seems
Yeah.
like C.J. Um, Stroud, I should say. I'm sorry. He seems like he has a very good environment all around, and he also reminds me of Hurts as far as his maturity level. And I think some of the questions when he came out of Ohio State is, overall, historically, a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks have not done all that well in the NFL, and I think people were trying to put him in the same breath of Justin Fields, he's in his own situation in Chicago, and it's questions whether he might be the guy going forward. But he's also already had two coaches as well. But I was very proud to see C.J. Stroud get not only get the win but put up those historic numbers, and it's great to see in today's NFL.
Yeah, and I know we have a lot of listeners in the Tampa area. I know they were unfortunately not too happy about that comeback win, but Tampa, they're coming along too. They're 3-5, and Baker Mayfield is surprising a lot of people and how well he's playing in terms of, like yesterday, he was 21 to 30, 265 yards, 2 TDs, no interceptions, and he may have found a home there. And he, quite frankly, they're fighting for Todd Bowles' job. But hopefully they can turn that around. And that was a tough situation for them losing in the last moment there. So the
Well, good thing for I'm sorry. Well, good thing
yeah.
for Tampa is their division because
Oh
you
yes.
have Atlanta, you got New Orleans, who's leading the division right now by default almost. So they still have a shot. So I know they got to get things together, shore things up, but. If there's ever a year for them to struggle or just try to find their way, and like you said, fight for Ty Bulls' job, thankfully they're in the NFC South.
Yeah, and New Orleans is leading that at 5-4, and what an ugly game by New Orleans yesterday. That was my survivor pool special. I said they're going to beat the Bears, man. But I watched that game, and they kept trying to give it back to the Bears over and over again with interceptions and fumbles, and they couldn't stop Foreman running the football. It was just like wow, they just figured they'd win the game kind of by rolling the ball out. And the Bears, Tyson Badgett was kind of competitive in this one, but when it comes to Saints, you got to tip your hat to Taysom Hill. He did a great job in this game, rushing the football, catching it, and then he threw for a touchdown as well.
Yeah, the one thing about Taysom Hill, he may not be a quarterback that you say, okay, we're going to surround, you want to build around, or someone you look at as a franchise quarterback, but he can make things happen. I mean, he's sort of like a fringe type of guy at that position and all, and that's why they're leading because worst come to worst, he'll make enough plays for you, and against a team like the Bears, that's just enough to get a win, and you see why they're leading the division by by a thread.
Yeah, and when you look at that AFC, NFC South, um, it, the Falcons are just they're not it. They're just not it. So I think I picked the Saints to win this division a while back, and they may win it kind of ugly. You saw last year the Bucks win it at 8-9. This division. You hope we don't have another team with a losing record hitting the playoffs, but the Saints did just enough to win that one. Now, the marquee game. Before I let you get out of here, I know you got a hard stop. The Chiefs versus Miami. Now, this is a Miami team. You saw them a couple weeks ago against the Eagles, and everybody was talking about how great they were and everything. But Miami continues to be what I call paper champion. Against the bad teams, they're whooping up on them. But when they face a solid playoff contending team, they don't have any wins against them. So, what do you see from this Miami team, and what did you think of that game over in Germany, where the Chiefs beat them 21-14?
Yeah, Miami to me is probably the most perplexing team in the league. Some weeks they look outstanding, and then others when you go against someone like a Kansas City, they went against the Eagles and everything. They just look mediocre, and it's probably easy to blame Tua, but it's not all his fault. I think their defense is probably not a championship defense the way it should be. And I think some coaching as well. So Mike McDaniel is one of the bright young minds here in this league and everything. But you know when when you have young coaches, sometimes you can't coach against yourself. Sometimes you can't be the smartest guy in the room. They've had their share of turnovers too. That turnover that. Tyreek Hill had early in the game that turned out to be quite a difference. So they have to hold on to the football as well. I know Tua missed a few plays, which he has to shore up. So he does take some blame, but I wouldn't put it all on him. And I go back to earlier in the season when they scored 70 points on the Denver Broncos. I never took that as something all that impressive. Of course, you score 70 points in the NFL, that's unprecedented. But you did kind of look at the opponent in Denver. They're still trying to get out of their own way, even though they have looked better and they beat Kansas City the previous week. But you just look at Miami's overall record. I know you play who you play, and you have no control who's on your schedule, but it's your job to beat them as well. So.
Yeah, and they're 6-3 now, and you have the Bills who are kind of leaking oil 5-4, and they have a lead in that division. So Miami, it's going to be interesting. They have their bye, as we said. Then they have the Raiders. Then they're at the Jets, at Washington, Tennessee, the Jets again, Dallas. That'll be an interesting game. Then they're at the Ravens, who are playing really well. And then they finish with Buffalo the last week of the season. So that could be for the division. So we're going to find out a lot more about Miami. But, they're not the greatest show on turf. They may break all the records. They may score over 600 some points. But Fangio's got to shore up that defense, and they got to do a better job in terms of stopping other teams. But Miami is definitely a team to watch. OJ, any other things you want to throw at us before you let it out? We let you go. Did you have any plugs or anything?
Well, I just want to say the Eagles are just a team to watch. And I've been very impressed with what Nick Sirianni has done to keep this team together. Because we all know, and Lloyd, I know you've been around a long time, we all know about the so called Super Bowl hangover. And,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's only been one or two teams in the last 50 years to have lost the Super Bowl and then return the following season. And, they're defying a lot of logic, a lot of history. And when I first wrote about them for the Tribune for the NFL preview, I said, they're a good team. I projected them to be almost as good as they were last year. However, they're fighting against history, and how can they do that? And also injuries as well. They've had their share of injuries this year, and for them to be 8-1, we knew that, and they have that little blemish against the New York Jets where they turned the ball over 4 or 5 times, but they've done a great job of overcoming it. But I give a lot of credit to Howie Roseman, the general manager, Nick Sirianni, his coaching staff, and you also factor in two new coordinators. That's a big change as well, and for them to absorb that and not really miss a beat. Overall, I just think that's fantastic on their part. And I think the other class of the NFC, and quickly going over to the AFC, I think it's a little more wide open. But from my standpoint, from what I saw, what Kansas City did to Miami on Sunday morning, I'm still going to, with the exception of maybe Baltimore, they can just kind of keep a streak going and everything. I kind of want to see Baltimore to, be there at the end. But until somebody knocks off Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, they're going to be hard to bet against, as we talk about everything the midpoint of the season.
All right, great. Well, we appreciate OJ Spivey from the Philadelphia Tribune joining us today, and Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. We'll get OJ back on later in the season when he has a little bit more time. And, it's great always to hear somebody that's in the locker room and down there every day talking to the players. So thanks for joining us this week, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Thank you, Lloyd. My pleasure. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right. All right, Insider Football still rolls on, and we still have some more time left. And as everybody knows, we like to recap all the games. And one of the biggest games, OJ kind of touched on it there, was the Baltimore Ravens had their fourth straight victory. And it was a dismantling down in Baltimore as they took care of the Seahawks 37-3. Lamar Jackson was tremendous in this game, 21 of 26, 187 yards passing. No TDs, unfortunately, no interceptions. He really didn't have to do a lot in that regard, but he did have 60 yards rushing. And this was all about the Ravens beating the Seahawks up front. The Seahawks, they traded for Leonard Williams a couple last week, and hopefully he can help shore up that defensive line and help them. But the Ravens were able to. The Ravens were just tremendous. Won 515 total yards. They had 27 rushes for 298 yards, controlling the clock, and they had 3 TDs. They are now 3-0 versus teams that had a winning percentage as when they were going into the game. And then conversely, their defense is looking like they have lots of teeth. Once again, this defense is always, it's been their calling card. Defensively, they shut down Kenneth Walker, the great running back for the Seahawks. He only had 9 rushes for 16 yards and only 1.8 yards per carry. You can see how that they were just dominant in that regard. And then you had Geno Stone, their safety. He had another interception. He has 6 interceptions right now to lead the National Football League. And then another big defender you had to talk about is Kyle Van Noy, a guy who they signed off the scrap heap, the former New England Patriot. He had 2 sacks and a big forced fumble. You saw him just kind of dominating the game as it went along. The Ravens defense as a whole had 4 sacks, and they were able to generate 4 turnovers. So you're starting to see the maturation of this team. And as Owen said, at 7-2, they have an opportunity to not even go to Kansas City because know that Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid have been so dominant over the years and kind of controlling the narrative in the playoffs as teams have come into Arrowhead and they've beat them up physically and won games. And it's going to be interesting to see if one of these teams can step up, like the Ravens, who are 7-2, and make the Chiefs go on a road in the playoffs. Speaking of the playoffs, let's kind of look at the playoff picture as we are in week 9. We'll start with the AFC. The Kansas City Chiefs are sitting at the top of the AFC West, and they're 7-2. Let's look at their schedule coming up. They're on a bye now that they're back from Germany. They have quality wins over, you would say, in the AFC. I'll go on that side of the ledger. They have quality wins over the Jacksonville Jaguars. They also have beaten them, the Chargers, who we'll see how they finish kind of up. And then they also beat the Dolphins. So when you look at the Chiefs, after the bye, they play the Philadelphia Eagles in that Super Bowl rematch. That's going to be a fun one to watch. Then you also have they're at the Raiders, and when you look at the Raiders, they were an interesting team. They get a win for Antonio Pierce in his coaching debut. That team has kind of maybe turned a corner in terms of they had a lot more excitement in the building. It took Josh McDaniels, get him out the door, and then these players seem to be a lot more happier. Aiden O'Connell, the rookie quarterback, was able to throw the ball down the field. They got Devontae Adams involved, Hunter Renfrow, who we haven't seen in quite some time, and you saw Max Crosby and all those guys celebrating Mark Davis. So that was a big win for the Raiders. Then you have the Chiefs. They're at Green Bay. They have Buffalo, who we're talking about in a second. Buffalo is kind of falling to the wayside. They're 5-4, and you have to start wondering, Sean McDermott, they gave him an extension, but is their window closing? Because that's a franchise. We saw them a couple of years ago lose in overtime to the Chiefs in the playoffs, and everybody thought, oh, they'll be back and they'll be a Super Bowl contender. But they've kind of taken a slide back, and Josh Allen is leading the NFL in interceptions. To close the season, the Chiefs are at New England. New England, 2-7. It's looking more and more like Bill Belichick is not going to survive this, and him and Robert Kraft will probably have to have a long decision whether he decides to walk away or Kraft says, you know what, 6 Super Bowl rings is not enough to buy the good faith. I think that in the end, you're probably going to see the Patriots step away from Belichick, and then Angel's jumping in here. Angel, they're saying maybe Washington, who's also kind of in disarray, they may be looking hard at Belichick. And I think if Belichick does leave the Patriots, he'll have a couple landing spots, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Washington, a couple places that he can go.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious of what the Commanders are thinking, because obviously you would think with the hire that they basically stole from Kansas City, they would end up promoting that gentleman. I feel bad without saying his name, but it's like, that's what I feel like. They're almost just saying you're good enough to be an OC, but you're not good enough to be the HC. And I thought, truthfully, he was going to stay in KC, so he'll be able to take that position away from Andy Reid. Because if I was Andy, the way I look at it, I'm walking away 2 Super Bowl rings. I probably would have called it quits last year and would just say, you know what, that's it. But I'm curious to know why the Commanders are seriously thinking about bringing Belichick in. And people can say whatever they want to say about the Patriots. Whatever, if you guys want to call it the cheating area, the non-cheating area, obviously Atlanta was the last one that got him to finally admit that they did. But I don't understand what's he going to do for the Commanders. If Ron Rivera can't right that ship, and I think there's still a lot going on in that front office, which kind of adds to everything going on down on the field.
Yeah.
I just don't see why they want, and they're curious enough to get Belichick. Like, what do they see in him that really brings it all together? I don't. Supposedly there is a trade in a place. I think he will be let go by New England. I know Robert Kraft probably doesn't want his career to end that way, but you're not doing anything for New England anymore.
Yeah, and what Belichick's bringing to the table is he's 18 wins from Don Shula's all-time record, and he brings that panache of a guy that's won Super Bowl rings as a head coach. He has that even his days with the Giants. Everybody thinks he's a genius and a mastermind. So these guys, when you're considered that, you're always going to get that next opportunity. Think about Mike Holmgren. He leaves Green Bay and then he goes to Seattle right away to give him an opportunity. I know when I covered Andy Reid in Philadelphia that last season, I think it was 2014. What an ugly season that was, and it's time for him to go. But Kansas City was waiting for him before the end of the week. He had a job there, so I think. Angel, to answer your question, a lot of people and owners in particularly, Joshua Harris, who's a brand new owner of Washington, he wants to make that splash, and he feels that Belichick will have that plan and he'll be able to, be the architect and build this thing from the ground up. But there's a lot of holes on this Washington team. I know they traded away Trace Young last week and the other defensive lineman, Sweat, they sent over to the Bears, and there's not a lot in the cupboard to build with. Yes, they're trying to get these picks, but Washington is struggling. They did get a good win. Surprisingly and funny, ironically, it's over the Patriots 20-17. But
right.
Washington, the Eagles really only have one team to worry about in that division, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. And I wanted to get your take. I know we had OJ who covered the game. He was there in the locker room. As you're an Eagles supporter, how did you feel watching them beat Dallas? And that was a close game. I know my father was at the game. He said, I was on pins and needles at the very end of that game, but they pulled it out.
It was. And I think the more annoying part of it was the Eagles dang on near beat the Eagles for all intents and purposes, because at the end of it in the fourth quarter, this team for me, and I mentioned it on Martinez and Company over on the on TBSN, is that to me, Lloyd, and I could be wrong, I don't see them yet, in my own opinion, I don't see them yet as Super Bowl contenders. They have the pieces into place. I just don't see it. You see from yesterday, a lot of the kind of the cushion coverage from the safeties late in the game, from the corners late in the game. And to me, that made no sense. You were in complete control. After they went ahead, they were in complete control. And what's driving me insane, I think, about the Eagles this season is it's either their first half is their full throttle, second half they come up short, or vice versa. It's less on the gas in the first half, full throttle in the second half, and then there's that kind of hiccup in between. Yesterday, again, you had the game won, and then you turn around and you do a 15-yard penalty. Then you do another 15-yard penalty. So basically, you put the game in Dak's hands. Then you get another small minor penalty. So basically, 56 yards in less than 20 seconds, the way you look at it. And then Dallas comes marching on the field. So I got to the point yesterday here in the studio where I was just yelling at the TV because I couldn't believe what was going on. It just made no sense to me. And I know Jalen got banged up. I hope Nick Sirianni said it's not a big deal so far when it comes to his knee. I hope not, because obviously we need him, and plus to get the rest this week. So hopefully he'll rest up the entire week and not worry about it until the following Wednesday when we know they're going to have to play Kansas City that Sunday. But to me, it drove me nuts yesterday to watch the team almost collapse to the point of how fired up those Eagles fans may have been, that if you'd have walked away, they already know they're not done yet healing from the Phillies. And you're talking about going down to, and it's no longer America's team. I don't care who says what. It's not America's team anymore. But to me, it's one of those things where the Eagles are making silly mistakes. Last week, 0 penalties, 0.
Yeah, 10
And
this
this
week.
week, right? It didn't make any sense. It's like they keep flipping this switch. I want them to just, if you're going to be neutral on the field, remain neutral. Don't give us this high-powered offense and then a high-powered defense the next week, and then we get back to neutral, and then it goes into a steeple where we just don't know who we're going to get. But yesterday's cushion coverage drove me nuts in the fourth, and I don't understand. And again, I'm not calling the players out because they know who they are, but you're giving them 4, 5 to 6 yards in between. And a lot of times we're just inside cuts. It wasn't anything fancy. You saw it coming,
Yeah.
yet you let them go, and it almost ended up blowing the game for them.
Yeah, it was. We talked about that kind of when OJ was on it, and it's definitely something in my notes that I kind of pointed out. It was they were hitting the middle of the field over and over again, and that's an area the Eagles are going to have to shore up. Whether it, they need to get Blankenship some help there, or their linebackers. Cunningham is a thumper, but he's that guy that's not the coverage guy. Morrow either. Ferguson had 7 receptions on 10 targets, 91 yards, and a touchdown. So that was the Dallas tight end, and it was an exciting game down the end. I think the guy you really got to give kudos to, though, is Brandon Graham. It was incredible. He's an older guy. He had those 2 sacks at the end in the fourth quarter that were huge. And then that 2-point conversion everybody talks about, was Dak in or not? When you look at the replay, you can totally see that Graham is the guy behind him that forced him to step out. And that 2-point conversion was a huge key to this game. And everybody kills Dak all the time, that he's a guy that can't finish games in this end. But I thought he played really well. And the Eagles did a nice job when they had to at the very end. They've been bend but don't break, as you said, all season. And Desai, he's got to figure out how to get this group more aggressive. It's got to be around that defensive front line, particularly Jalen Carter and the rest of those guys up front. If they can get that natural pressure, it's going to help everybody behind them. So maybe some more blitzes, something to shore up that defense. Last year, the Eagles had 70 sacks, so to lead NFL. We know they may not get that many, but they got to get the pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, because Dak was kind of comfortable back there, and the Eagles made sure he didn't score, but it was a little shaky there in the red zone a couple times.
It was. And I also want to get back to it. I think was it the rookie wide receiver for Dallas where the one touchdown, I know one was called back because obviously he came up short in the goal line. I forget the other gentleman that scored the touchdown.
Yeah, Tolbert.
Yeah, which it should have been a touchdown anyways because it was assisted by the ground. He didn't have complete control, and you can see the tip of the football hitting the ground itself, even though his hand was under it, but it was assisted by the ground. Yet they still allowed for that touchdown to happen. So I think, amongst other things, obviously going on with the Eagles, but the officiating as well, still have to get some of these calls right because no offense to Dallas either, and I know when they went home upset because of the loss, Dallas also didn't get some favorable calls, no matter which way you look at it. So I think the officiating with the NFL needs to tighten up still just a little bit more. I mean, we see it week in and week out. But on the defensive side, you're absolutely right. Eagles are going to need some help. They are banged up. They're about 12 players banged up. Obviously, now you lose Dallas Goedert, which is not a good thing because now the Eagles have to get basically a rental somewhere, basically dirt cheap until the end of the season because he's not coming back anytime soon. So this bye week couldn't come at a better time as far as to get guys healthy. But now defensively, Nick Sirianni's really going to have to go into his bag of tricks and figure out what to do because his secondary hasn't been playing so hot. What you have in the practice squad is not the best either. And I understand it because you hope that all these guys weren't banged up the way they are right now. But the Eagles have a lot of work to do in order to get playoffs. I can see it. Super Bowl, not yet.
Yeah, and they want that home field advantage, and that's going to be huge for them. But they got to watch out for the Lions, who are 6-2, and the Lions have a very soft schedule coming up. And when you look at the Lions, they're on a bye this week, but they have the Chargers, Chicago, who's terrible, Green Bay, at New Orleans, at Chicago again, Denver, at Minnesota, at Dallas, and Minnesota to end it. So a lot of winnable games. So you're going to have to, the Eagles fans are going to have to watch out for the Lions if the Eagles stumble in some way. Getting back to your question, definitely, you hear me every week. Ryan does too about these officials. They miss so many things. there was a ticky-tack call. I don't know if you saw this in the it was the Patriots against the Commanders, and they said that it was roughing the passer, and literally it was a form tackle. He tackles a guy to the ground, and they said he put his full body weight on him. I mean, it was ridiculous. Even the rules official was like, no, he couldn't even defend it. And I agree with you that these officials, until they make them, they're not full-time employees. So maybe they need to make them full-time employees,
Yeah.
make them go to classes, rewatch stuff. Because too often I think they're getting too involved and there's too many flags in the game, particularly on the illegal contacts and then they miss some other things, while they call that. So much to debate on in terms of the officials. You'll never hear me defend them. That Eagles Dallas game had 10 apiece, so there's 20 flags going on, and it just disrupts the flow of the game. And fans come to watch the players play, and they don't want to see the officials get involved. And a lot of times they're having these conferences and going back and forth. Oh, was this the right play? Not the right play? And you have to, they need to do a better job. I'll just put it that way, the officials.
They do. And you got to figure, so how can college get it right? Because obviously when you go from high school and you want to transfer into the college referee portal, if you want to call it that way, there's all these developments that you have to do and learn in high school in order to make it to the college ranks. And everybody knows, then you literally start from the very bottom, because even before you even think of calling a bowl game, first of all, the entire officiating crew has to be on the same sheet of music. If one guy or girl, because we know that we have women now inside the ranks as well,
Sure.
But if one of those two don't do well or you guys don't mesh well, that officiating crew doesn't get the opportunity of calling a bowl game. They have to review film. There's a lot of things they have to do. So how in the world can college get it right, but the NFL can get it right? And you mean to tell me that you cannot pay $1 billion industry to somehow or another put together for the referees to say, okay, here's you guys are going to NFL Academy. You're all going to get together. Here's your base salary.
Sure.
And then give them bonuses. If they get it right, they actually get calls right. There's incentives that you can do to say, all right, you know what? We got to learn from our mistakes. And this officiating crew is not good. Let's mix it up. But we can go on for hours when it comes to these guys, because it's just, I don't understand how some of the stuff. And I think one of the calls yesterday was the same thing too, was there was a roughing the passer call in the Eagles game. And it really wasn't a roughing the passer. But I mean, I don't know. And then you hear stories too about obviously officials getting paid to throw certain games.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be very tough for them to fix a game. My grandfather used to say every week, it's all fixed. That was always his big line, And sometimes I think I'm like, I watch these games and it comes down to the very end. They love these spectacular finishes. They want it to be like that Eagles Dallas game. It's within one score. It's coming down to the last play. Everyone's watching, and they always somehow seem to get involved. And back in the day, you would say, okay, Dallas is 90 yards to go. There's no way they're going to do this in the amount of time left on the clock, less than a minute. But, it always seems to come down to the very end, and they love that. They love the drama around it. And maybe there is a red button somewhere that Roger Goodell's pushing and saying, all right, the conspiracy theorists coming out in me. I know my one buddy is a big conspiracy theorist, but these officials will have to see on them. Speaking of spectacular finishes and everything, I'm going to give out my game ball. My game ball, it has to go to Texans rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud, who was just tremendous in that 39-37 last-second win over Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 30-42, 470 yards, which is a rookie record, 5 TDs, which is a franchise record, 0 interceptions. And this young man he's looking like not only the rookie of the year, but he may get in the MVP race. So did a great job against the Bucs. I know it broke some Bucs fans' hearts that they were able to get that win. But, you're seeing a maturation of a young quarterback. I thought on the Bucs side, Baker Mayfield and that group has a lot of fight. It's going to be interesting to see if they can save Todd Bowles' job there. And in terms of my lackey, I give out a lackey each week. This is a guy that can't get it done. As Mickey would say, he's a bum. And Bears rookie quarterback Tyson Bagent. Oh, he was terrible. I watched a lot of this game, unfortunately, because I picked the Saints in my survivor pool, and then they got it done, but it was ugly fashion. Bagent was 18 of 30, 220 yards, 2 TDs. He had 3 interceptions, had a big fumble at the end, and the Saints just kept trying to let them in the door, and the Bears couldn't get it done. The Bears right now are 2-7. They're in the mix of all the, Caleb Williams and Drake May talk in the draft. So is there anybody that stood out to you that you think should get a game ball or a lackey this week around the National Football League?
I would have to agree with CJ Stroud because again, how does Tampa Bay and you talk about a double cushion coverage, which it seemed like it was with those guys. You saw what CJ can do. And I think I know we can call the kid, obviously he's a young man, but this kid comes into this league and there was high expectations. And I'm not saying that he's met those expectations, but he's been able to win games and he's been able to win close games. But Tampa Bay, another team yesterday who had the game in the bag, had it completely. I want to ask you, Lloyd, if you're the head coach, you put yourself, you're Todd Bowles now. Do you take the runoff and bring now the clock down to 29 seconds with the possibility now you have 3 plays to be able to win the game, or do that silly mistake where he did was to call the timeout? Now you add the 20 seconds back. Now it's 49 seconds. You only take 10 seconds off the clock to be able to score, and then you allow, obviously, CJ and company to come back on the field. So before the lackey, because there's lackeys I can end up giving out, time management, is that now become a hindrance when it comes to Todd Bowles?
Yeah, that's something that's going to bite him, and you want to leave them as little time on the clock as possible. I thought I was like, shouldn't there be a runoff here? I was yelling at TV, and then I noticed what you said. They took time out, and you see these coaches take a timeout. That's actually helping the other side where they can get the time to kind of talk and formations. Maybe I'll set up 3 plays, and then we'll go bump right down the field, which they did, and they're saying, yeah, we're trying to get our defensive breath, but definitely I thought in that situation, why not get the runoff? Why not make it as hard as possible on these guys? And then too often at the end of these games, I'm seeing coaches, and the Bucs did it too when we talk about the Eagles. They go into that shell, that prevent defense. That they change everything they've been doing the whole game. And why not just continue with going after somebody and not making it so easy? Because it seems today, Angel, that these teams are able to get out of bounds a lot easier and stop the clock a lot easier. Because back in the day, it always seemed like, no, you once we came under a minute, most teams, they were not going to get it done.
They weren't. And you talk about as far as the lackeys when it comes to Tyson Bagent, it's funny because here's how quickly the script can flip on folks, because earlier during the week, there were all kinds of high praises from ESPN and Fox. Tyson Bagent's coming in here. He's going to do such a great job, blah, blah, blah. And then yesterday happens. So it's like you're riding on a kid that was basically a no-name. Nothing against the guy, but he's a no-name. Yeah. And the Bears are just a dysfunctional group where I don't know where the Bears go from this point, honestly. Obviously, other than getting rid of the head coach, because, again, safe hires proves once again in the NFL is not the route you end up going. So he gets one. And I got to give the other one to the Bucs, because I don't understand how week in and week out you have Todd Bowles saying that we practiced well, we had a good practice. And come Tuesday, same thing, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But the product you put on the field is something completely different. Baker Mayfield has matured. He has matured so much as a person, as a team player, as the individual. But there's only so much too he can end up carrying. That defense allowed for that game to come back, to allow CJ. I mean, amazing numbers he put, yesterday as a rookie. But I don't understand for the life of me. You know what? I'm going to give a Lackey Award 2 to Todd Bowles for next week, because he's going to do the same thing coming up this week. It's just the way I see it. But it's a shame because you get an opportunity, you blow it.
And he's definitely one of those coaches. Brian and I were talking about earlier in the season who's on a hot seat. We talk about Belichick. We talk about Bowles. You got to throw him in there. Matt Eberflus, I think he's dead man walking for the for the Bears that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then you talk about Brandon Staley. I know they're playing tonight and they're trying to save their season with the Chargers, but he's another guy who you got to say, okay, they may be going in another direction. So typically every off season, there's about 5 coaching changes. And unfortunately for some of those coaches that I named, they may be part of that. And you may also want to throw Ron Rivera in there, who we talked about earlier too. So going to be a lot of movement. And then that's where you start thinking, you're like, how does some of these guys get a job? You look at Josh McDaniels and what a bad job he did for the Denver Broncos, and then he leaves in 2009. He goes and hides behind Belichick, and then he comes back. Mark Davis hires him. He only wins 9 games for the Raiders. I think he was like 9-16, and he looked just inept. And you wonder, okay, how's he getting a job? And Brandon Staley, a guy who's supposed to have defense is supposed to be his calling card, but the Chargers cannot close games out. So some of these coaches are firmly on a hot seat. And as we go along in the season, you may not going to say their teams quit, but some of their teams are going to kind of take a step back, and then it'll be kind of easy to sort this thing out. Now, each week we start looking at upcoming games, and this is another week where we have some huge buys in week 10. You have Kansas City's off. They're 7-2. The Rams, another team who are kind of disarray. I think McVay will be fine there. You have the Dolphins 6-3. They're off, and the Eagles 8-1. They're off. So for the fantasy football players, good luck without some of those guys in your lineup. One of the games I do want to touch on, though, you have San Francisco at 5-3. They're at the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are 6-2. That's a 1:00 game on Fox. When I look at this one, I still think the Jacksonville Jaguars have kind of turned the corner, and they're a dangerous team in terms of Trevor Lawrence, and the defense are able to run the football, physical team, and you have the Niners limping in after 3 straight losses. So what do you think in this one?
I'm kind of surprised at this point when it comes to the Niners, because you look, they were right on the Eagles' coattails not more than 2 weeks ago. I think the rebound for 49ers will end up being this week. Brock Purdy, once again, it shows that obviously he's not an AI or a robot or anything else, that he is human, and he's going through his growing pains. I do like San Fran. I think they pick up the win this week.
Yeah, and they're coming off their bye, so that's a good time to get ready. And now they get Chase Young in there, too, and that defense is scary. They may be able to get some pressure on Trevor Lawrence because that offensive line is banged up. I know Cam Robinson, those guys are trying to shore up that offensive line. We'll see there. Another game right there, we're on 102.9 the game area down there in Tampa, Florida area. You have the Tennessee Titans at 3-5. They're coming into Tampa, who's also 3-5. This is a game where the loser leaves town match. It's almost like the old, WWE match where if they lose this game, they're done, because they'll be 3-6. And it's all about Derrick Henry. You do think that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be able to stop Derrick Henry. And then they've also Levis has played very well for the Titans coming there, their rookie quarterback. So I'm leaning towards the Titans in this one.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. I think the way Tampa has performed, you also take a look at the run. They haven't been stopping it all together. They've allowed some of the holes open up in the middle of the pack of the run. So I think for me, I think that the Titans are just a bit hungrier. They know where they know the run they have to make in order to even become a wild card team, if at all possible. I think the Bucs have not convinced me. Normally I would go with them, but they haven't convinced me the way the defense has been playing. And again, clock management in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and probably the biggest game next week is at 1:00. You have the Cleveland Browns at 5-3. They're at the Baltimore Ravens, who are 7-2, and the Ravens defense is looking like one of the best in the league. They're tops in turnovers and points, everything. And when I look at this one, the Browns, they've strung some wins together, but they lose Jedrick Willis yesterday to a bad knee injury. You have Deshaun Watson, who's still, to me, he doesn't look right. He has a lot of rust, and he doesn't look like the same player he was with Houston. So this is a tough assignment for them to go into Baltimore. Baltimore's such a tough place to play. And the Ravens, as I said earlier, have won 4 straight games. I think they continue this one and take control of the AFC North by beating the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, Ravens right now. I mean, you mentioned it earlier in your show as far as Seattle, and I really thought Seattle was going to put a bigger challenge onto the Ravens, but the Ravens took care of business. And when it comes to the Browns, I think it's going to be the same way too. I don't see the Browns even as much as people want to talk about Baker Mayfield. He had better success with the Browns than what Deshaun has. Deshaun to me just looks like he's gonna at this point this season is collect a paycheck, try to get income next season and see what happens. But for me, I think the Ravens, Lamar Jackson, that defense is starting to get really hungry. And everybody knows anything with Jim Harbaugh, he gets on a roll. He does really well. We lost Lloyd here, but we'll end up hopefully get him back. But right now, for me, I think the Ravens have complete control of their own destiny. And if anybody says anything otherwise, I mean, who else other than Pittsburgh, who's been stringing along some wins? They've been hanging in there, but they've been stringing along some wings. You guys are listening to Lloyd Vance's Insider Football right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game. Hopefully, Lloyd will jump back in there. He may have lost his connection. So we'll come here momentarily as we're getting ready to wrap up the show shortly anyways. You guys can catch Lloyd every Monday night now at 8 p.m., and you can listen to myself and Ryan Monday through Friday on the Tony Bruno Sports Network from 6 to 8 p.m. as we are live on Tony's network. So if you guys are here, you guys know that Tony is on my network on Friday nights with Miss Robin into the night. That will continue to be the same from 7 to 9 p.m. But Tony has allowed me to come over to his network, step up to the major leagues, and we are on from 6 to 8 p.m. live Monday through Friday. So if you guys missed it, you can catch the show tomorrow. And I won't give away the number here because it is for Tony, but you guys are able to call and text the show. So make sure you tune in that way as well. So I think Lloyd may have lost his connection altogether. And if he did, well, then we will see everyone here come next week. Maybe Lloyd doesn't know he lost it. Give me a second. Let's see if he may not know that he had lost his connection. So let's see if we can send him an instant message and get him back. Give me 1 second, folks. So hopefully Lloyd will jump back in there. Sometimes the video goes away. You don't realize it as you're talking. So Lloyd, I may be talking and Lloyd may be listening to me. And unfortunately, he may not know this video went away. It happened to him once before. We know with OJ, we had some technical issues on OJ's end. So Lloyd may have not noticed that it may have gone away. Or if he's on his laptop, he may have forgotten to plug it in. So it's just the way it is. So we'll give him a minute. If not, we'll wrap it up. And then we'll come back next week to make sure that Lloyd can finish out his show. So don't forget, things are changing. So right now, the network itself on the radio side, you guys are hearing a lot of best of on the radio side. Soon the shows will be lined back up again. There's some changes to the network, and there will be some music added on as well. Your phone, if you downloaded the apps to Sports Radio, on the Apple side, you guys will get an update. There is a new logo that is being placed along with a new network. And then on the Android side, if you happen to download it on the Android side, you would have to re-download it. And Lloyd just let me know that his internet is out, and that's why he's not back on. So, all right, well, listen, we'll close out the show. Lloyd will be back here next week with internet. Unfortunately, again, folks, sometimes happen when we're live. So don't forget to tune in tonight or again. Oh, there's Lloyd.
There we are.
All right.
I don't know what happened. I don't know if it was my internet or you or what. Or technical difficulties you had with OJ earlier, but we appreciate everybody joining us on Lloyd Vance Insider Football tonight on 129 The Game and the Broad Street South Network, particularly OJ Spivey from the Philadelphia Tribune. It was great to talk Philadelphia Eagles versus Dallas Cowboys with him. Appreciate Angel jumping in at the very end there to help bring us home. And as always, great work on the ones and twos. So we will catch you next week on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game and the Broad Street South Network. See ya.